They didn't emerge from 1980s camcorder footage or modern hunter's tales. The beings we now call Bigfoot have existed in the human imagination long before America had a name. In myths, oral traditions, totems, and rock carvings, the trace of these creatures stretches back thousands of years. And while modern science tries to classify them as an undeveloped ape, the indigenous tribes of North America never saw them as animals. These were beings to be reckoned with, feared, respected. The Salish people spoke of Semiquez, a large, hairy man of the forest who dwelled in the mountains, avoided humans, but always watched. According to the stories, he had no need for fire or speech, yet understood everything. Other tribes, like the Cree and Shoshone, had different names for them, but the description was nearly identical. A bipedal creature over 7 feet tall, covered in hair, with massive hands, deep-set eyes, and footsteps that snapped branches like twigs. Not a predator, but not a friend either. It was nature's shadow, the wild in its rawest form. Cave walls in British Columbia and Oregon still hold ancient carvings showing figures with elongated arms, oversized heads, and silhouettes eerily similar to primates, depicted among bears, elk, and wolves. Some have red eyes. Others show giants holding humans upside down by their legs. These were not decorations. They were warnings. What's striking is that for many tribes, these creatures were not beasts. They were part of the spiritual landscape. They were compared to mountain spirits, guardians of boundaries. The Lummi people tell of hairy men who appeared before storms, silently watching from ridgelines. Then came the wind, the water, and death. In this worldview, they were not monsters. They were signs. Yet the fear was tangible. Certain forests were strictly avoided, with warnings passed down to children. Don't go where the birds don't sing. These places were considered the domain of the forest giant. If someone vanished there, they weren't searched for. He took them, the elders would say. Among the Hoopa of Northern California, there's a chilling tale of a night giant who came to camps when children misbehaved. But over time, it became clear these weren't just cautionary tales. The beings appeared outside of legend. Old warriors describe hearing something in the dusk, something that didn't sound like an animal. A crack of branches, a breath. Folklorists note the appearance of these identical figures in dozens of tribes that had no contact with one another. If Bigfoot is a myth, why is it so deeply rooted in cultures that never cross paths? And if it's an archetype, what shaped it? Fear of what? Perhaps these beings truly existed. Beings that survived from another time, not some distant epoch, but something much closer. Just beyond the edge of the tree line, in that forest that feels safe by day, but shifts after dark. Maybe the tribes weren't imagining them. Maybe they were just describing what they saw. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, America experienced a wave of discoveries. Alongside archaeological finds of ancient cultures, another series of reports began spreading across the country. Less convenient, less structured, and far more threatening to the established view of human history. Hundreds of newspaper articles from states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada, and Ohio described the same thing: the discovery of giant human skeletons, sometimes with anatomical anomalies that didn't fit into any known model. These skeletons often stood over 10, 12, and in some cases even 15 feet tall. Elongated skulls, 6 fingers, massive jaws, fused vertebrae, and other unusual features. In 1879, the St. Paul Pioneer Press reported on 7 skeletons with skulls large enough to completely encase a grown man's head. In 1911, inside a cave near Lovelock, Nevada, mummified remains were found. Beings nearly 9 feet tall, with bright red hair and unusually wide pelvic bones. Initially, the artifacts were displayed in a local museum. Later, transferred to the Smithsonian. Today, no official record of them remains. Curiously, the Smithsonian Institution appears repeatedly in such stories. As the largest scientific and museum complex in the United States, it holds formal authority over the preservation of national artifacts. And it has been mentioned again and again as the final destination for remains that didn't fit the narrative. There are no public confirmations, but dozens of witnesses, researchers, archaeologists, farmers, have claimed they submitted discoveries to the institution and never heard back. In 1934, a tomb was discovered in the Catskill Mountains of New York, containing a skeleton approximately 14 feet tall, with jaws large enough to envelop a normal human skull. 3 days after the news broke, the site was sealed off. The archaeologists were removed, all materials confiscated. The only surviving trace is a newspaper clipping now stored on microfilm at the Albany Municipal Library. The broader picture is unsettling. Across different decades and regions, independent sources reported identical anomalies. Some were photographed, some were seen by locals, yet every case vanished, inaccessible, erased from public reach. Not one of these finds is listed in the National Archaeological Register. Not one is found in school books. Some believe these discoveries posed a direct threat to the accepted narrative of human evolution. Because if giants once lived on this continent, and if their bones don't belong to Homo sapiens, then the entire Darwinian model begins to fracture. The question becomes, where did they come from? And why did they disappear? But perhaps they didn't. Perhaps some never died. They simply faded into the forests. And it is there, on the edges of civilization, in the dark woods still unexplored, that we find a figure watching from afar. It doesn't speak. It leaves no body, but it leaves an impression, a living echo of something that once was. Bigfoot as a remnant of an erased race, a physical fragment of a world we're no longer meant to know. The story of giants who once walked the earth isn't limited to archaeological fragments and folklore. It has another source, older than any newspaper, more enduring than any museum. In the 6th chapter of the book of Genesis, it is written, "There were giants in the earth in those days, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown." For centuries, this verse has sparked debate, but many biblical scholars believe it refers to real beings, the Nephilim, giant hybrids created outside of God's design. According to the apocryphal Book of Enoch, the Nephilim were the offspring of fallen angels and human women. They were giants, physically powerful, spiritually empty, morally corrupt. They taught mankind bloodshed, sorcery, and the use of weapons. It was because of them, the text says, that God chose to flood the earth. But one detail is often overlooked: the implication that not all of them perished. Some were reserved for later times, and even after the flood, the Bible mentions giants reappearing. If we view this not as poetic metaphor but as historical record, a compelling hypothesis emerges. Bigfoot could be a remnant of this corrupted bloodline, a punished but surviving creature, enormous, speechless, and out of place in the divine order. It lingers in the shadows not as creation, but as the byproduct of a fall, not part of evolution, but a biological scar of spiritual rebellion. In Deuteronomy and Numbers, the Bible speaks of the Anakim, giants so fearsome that Israelite spies described themselves as grasshoppers in their sight. They were said to be descendants of the Nephilim, living in fortified cities, unnatural and unclean. They were not just tall men. Their very origin made them cursed, outsiders to humanity, rejected by God. They were to be destroyed. Some Jewish traditions suggest that a remnant of the giants survived, but lost not only their spiritual nature, but their intellect. They became wild, isolated, devolved, and over generations transformed into the creatures we now describe as Bigfoot. And here's a detail worth noting. These beings never seek out civilization. They don't build, they don't speak, they don't use tools. They only watch from the tree line. Medieval Christian chronicles, especially in northern and western Europe, describe wild men of the woods, covered in hair, immensely strong, who fled to the mountains at the sight of humans. They were viewed not as noble savages, but as symbols of sin, punished by God through exile. Their images even appeared in heraldry, not as a sign of strength, but as a warning. There's also a theological concept, known as the lost image of God. According to it, every being was created in God's image, but sin, especially that born from unnatural unions, could erase it. In this light, Bigfoot is neither beast nor man. It is a living fragment of a fallen nature, no longer belonging to God's intended creation, yet somehow preserved. It doesn't speak, it leaves no dead behind, but its form, towering, broad-shouldered, silent, and fleeting, stands before us as a reminder that the world was once very different. And perhaps that is why it avoids being found, because if we do find it, we may be forced to remember that we are not alone, and that part of the old sin still walks among the trees. They don't leave behind bodies. They don't sleep in nests. They don't build shelters. Bigfoot, contrary to the notion of it being a simple creature of flesh and blood, often behaves unlike any known biological organism. Witnesses report strange details, appearing and vanishing without a sound, moving through darkness without casting a shadow, and the eerie sensation of being watched, not with eyes, but with thoughts. In many cases, the encounters aren't just visual. They feel like a form of contact that defies explanation. One of the most disturbing aspects is the psychological impact, reported by those who have seen the creature. People describe sudden paralysis, disorientation, and an overwhelming fear that begins before they even see anything. This phenomenon is often referred to as the zone of silence. Birds stop singing, insects vanish. The air becomes heavy, and then the body refuses to move, as if nature itself is warning that you've crossed into something else's domain. Some researchers speculate that Bigfoot may use infrasound, low-frequency vibrations that affect the human brain, inducing panic, confusion, and hallucinations. This phenomenon is known in the animal kingdom. Tigers and elephants use it to disorient prey without physical contact. But in Bigfoot's case, the effect is deeper. In some instances, the fear lingers long after the creature is gone, like something embedded in the subconscious. Another anomaly? The absence of physical traces. Many witnesses have seen the creature, but afterward, there are no tracks, no scent, no broken branches. Others have found enormous footprints, some as long as 18 inches, clear, fresh, and suddenly cut off in the middle of nowhere, as if the creature simply vanished into thin air. This gives rise to a different hypothesis. Perhaps Bigfoot doesn't fully exist in our dimension. Many cultures hold stories of partially visible beings, forest spirits that can manifest only under specific conditions, or only to certain people. In Norse folklore, they're the Huldra. In Japan, the Tengu. In Celtic myth, the Selkies. They share common traits, a connection to nature, the ability to disappear, and an existence somewhere between physical and spiritual. Perhaps Bigfoot is not just the remnant of ancient giants. Perhaps it is a tear in the veil, a fracture in the fabric of reality that never fully healed after whatever catastrophe came before us. If that's the case, then each sighting isn't just an encounter with a creature. It's a glimpse of a broken piece of creation still searching for a place to belong. Even reports of glowing eyes or bioluminescent outlines in the dark take on a new meaning. These may not be literal lights, but reflections of another frequency of existence, one that we can't fully perceive or measure. And so the core question remains: is Bigfoot a creature of flesh or a shadow cast by something that came before us? Are we searching for a beast or for the edge between reality and what we've forgotten? Every year, hundreds of people vanish without a trace in U.S. national parks. No witnesses, no clear explanation, no bodies. Experienced hikers, military personnel, even search and rescue officers, gone. Their tracks simply end mid-trail, on soft soil, near water. And when you dig deeper, most of these disappearances occur in areas where Bigfoot sightings have been reported for decades. Coincidence? Or territory we were never meant to cross? Researcher David Pollitt, author of the Missing 411 series, analyzed hundreds of such cases, and the patterns are chilling. Children vanish within sight of adults, and no sound is ever heard. Adults disappear on trails they've walked dozens of times. Bodies, when found, are often discovered atop cliffs or in remote places they couldn't have reached without gear. These aren't accidents. They feel like something pulling them in. These areas have come to be known, unofficially, as forbidden zones. But the idea is much older than the term. In the traditions of Native American tribes, such places were always known. Lakes that whisper in the mist, caves from which not all return, forests where the birds do not sing. These weren't holy sites. They were zones of warning, not of gods or animals, but of beings that should not be disturbed. And those ancient taboos align with modern patterns of vanishings. They also match areas with the highest concentration of Bigfoot encounters. Witnesses often describe the same sequence, a dead silence before anything happens. The feeling of being watched, distant knocks, tree snapping, with no visible cause. Then fear, disorientation, equipment failure, lights flicker, compasses spin, radios die. Some of these regions, like parts of Mount Rainier, Yellowstone, and the Black Hills, also show heightened military activity. Officially, they're training zones. But locals speak of men in black, arriving after strange events, scanning the ground with strange devices, then disappearing. Even news stories that once reported sightings or disappearances are later edited, retracted, or lost entirely. Some believe the government knows more, that these places hold something hidden, and Bigfoot is not just a resident, but a guardian. His appearances aren't random. They happen when someone gets too close. Not to attack, but to warn. To protect whatever lies beyond the line. Perhaps these territories are remnants of a pre-flood world, or gateways, places where reality itself is thinner, where something ancient still leaks through, and Bigfoot's role is to keep the border intact. In this view, Bigfoot isn't a predator or an animal. He's part of a security system, biological, spiritual, or both. That's why he doesn't appear everywhere. He is tied to the zone. He exists not to live freely, but to monitor. If you overlay a map of tribal taboos, missing persons reports, restricted land, and eyewitness sightings, what emerges is not chaos. It's a shape, a contour, a boundary, and beyond it lies something we were never meant to find. These forbidden zones aren't labeled, but they are real, and something still walks their edge. Something that remembers what came before we arrived. We want to find him, photograph him, study him, capture him, prove his existence to the world. But what if his existence isn't a discovery, but a sentence? What if Bigfoot isn't the missing piece of nature, but an unwanted one? A symbol of something that broke in the world and was never fixed? For centuries, people have tried to fit Bigfoot into familiar categories. An undiscovered primate, a relic hominid, perhaps a new subspecies of man. All these theories share one foundation. They rely on the Darwinian model of the world, but none of them hold up. He has no habitat, no groups, no life cycle, no body, no DNA. Bigfoot doesn't behave like a part of the natural order. He is the anti-witness of evolution. His presence is a rupture. He has no history, no future. He feels torn out of context, like a page that accidentally remained in a book that has since been rewritten. Imagine a being that is not supposed to exist, not scientifically, ontologically. Bigfoot is a fracture in the structure, and maybe that's why he can't be found. Because he is not part of this world, he simply remains. From a religious perspective, this is even clearer. Bigfoot doesn't fit into the concept of a divinely created world governed by man. He has no place in the order of creation. He is either the remnant of sin or proof that humanity didn't finish what it was meant to finish, that it failed to erase what should have been erased. That's why he doesn't attack, doesn't communicate, doesn't coexist. He exists apart, and only when we come too close. Some suggest Bigfoot is a physical manifestation of memory, like a scar, not fully alive, but not dead either. He is a reminder, and that is the most terrifying part, because if we find him, we will have to admit the world we believe in is incomplete, that it has holes, that it is held together by something that was never meant to survive. Bigfoot is not a creature, he is a proof. Proof that something exists which should not. Proof that we do not control the world as much as we think. In that sense, perhaps the greatest truth is not that we might find Bigfoot, but that we haven't. Because if we ever do, it won't change our understanding of nature. It will change our understanding of reality.